Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Good morning, good morning. Oh, good, blessed morning. My name is Andrea Simantov, and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I will share with you that this is the first morning my eyes are opening up in my blessed Israel in a month. Exactly 1 month. 1 month ago, I got on a plane and I left Israel and I flew to America for many, many wonderful reasons. And as the plane landed last night in my beloved Israel, I wept. I looked very strange because on an El Al flight, one could see weeping, but United Airlines, not so much. I wept, I sobbed. It felt good to be home. So before we start a very personal show, a very passionate show, and a very perhaps selfish show, but I'm happy to share with my friends, my overseas friends and my local friends who join me each week on this program, I'd like to first acknowledge, hello, good morning, good night. It is late in America to those listening in Eretz Israel, listening in from America. Eretz Mishpacha. There are those listening in this morning from Canada. Hi. Australia, it's the afternoon. Boker Tov, Eretz Israel, Anipo. Listening in this morning from Ireland, France, and interesting, happy to see you with us, Ghana. Okay, so when we come back today, we're going to talk about what I traveled for, the reasons to leave, promises I made and broke, but promises indeed I kept. It will be a show of reflection. The chat room is open. If you're listening live, indeed you are listening on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, press the button. Tell me that you're listening in. Be kind. It's a morning for kindness. It's a day for kindness. It's a season for kindness. And once again, we have reflection. Happily, we have no politics today, and we do have a lot of Torah. Man, it's great to be back and to share this morning with you. Andrea Simantov, I'll see you on the other side.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Okay, we're back. Andrea Simantov on Pull Up a Chair. And because this is a real show, you actually hear the sound of the printer in the background. We're still working in our home studios because guess what? COVID is still out there. All right. Thank you for joining me today. And a lot of what I want to share. We talked a lot. Remember, the airports, it looked like they would be closed forever. And suddenly a miracle happened. And my travel agent said, I can get you to America, but I can't promise that I'll get you back. And you know what? What a joke. That was a good yuck. And guess what? He was righter than he even knew at the time. It was difficult. I was supposed to have come back a week ago, and I didn't. Instead, I managed to get onto a flight by the skin of my teeth only what is today? Today's Thursday here in Israel. I got on, I don't remember, Tuesday night, and I made it here. So let me tell you some of the realities. This is not a joke. I can't believe I'm sharing this. I literally spent 850 American dollars, US greenbacks, on getting COVID testing. How many super fast COVID tests I took, a test twice, 2 or 3 times called PCR. There were all kinds of time stipulations. I was told that I had to have my test within 72 hours of flying back. I messed up the first time. I didn't understand that a PCR test was not a COVID test. By the time I got the proper test, the results didn't come back until I should have been loading my luggage onto the first plane. It was terrible. My friends, if you can stay home, stay home until it's clearer. Of course, there were many humorous moments. Ha ha ha. Let's laugh together as I lean over these things here. The first humorous moment is what my house looks like after leaving my husband alone for 1 month. And he keeps saying things like, it looks pretty good. I did a pretty good job. And we're married, please God, next week. Next week's show will be my anniversary show, 10 years. After 10 years, I know to just nod and say, yeah, house looks good. When he goes to work this week, I have to bring in a cleaning crew and a derrick to come take out the filth, the laundry. There's no talking. All right, but we hear the sense of humor. Anyway, back to COVID. The first test I got in a very ecumenical spirit, I was staying in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm not joking. I became very close with the members, the congregation. I'm already laughing, of the Faith Community Baptist Church. I think that might have been in Wheaton. Anyway, I was swabbed the first time for my return home as part of the African American Health Program. And I promise you, if I stayed any longer chatting online, waiting to be seen by like the next swabber, I was going to be made the assistant deacon. Anyway, they promised me this African American Health Program. I have to tell you, the Baptists were very, very nice, and they were very good, and they promised me my tests within like 12 hours. The Baptists were wrong. They didn't even come into it was bad. But anyway, when I saw the results weren't coming back, I got into a panic. I took my mother, 91 years old, I shoved her in the car for company that day. I tell you, I drove to, don't believe all those ads for CVS. CVS, a pox on you, CVS. You promise immediate testing. You can't sign up for CVS testing if you have a foreign credit card and a foreign address. I finally ran into one CVS store sobbing, somebody please help me. Nobody helped me. So then I found the Seventh-day Adventists. I have to tell you, between the Baptists and the Adventists, I was getting closer to adequate testing. So the Adventists sent me out to Germantown where I got testing, but this time, not knowing if I needed the COVID test or the PCR test, I plunked down $250, and those tests came back. It was very impressive. They came back in time for the next flight, which, very nervous, the travel agent postponed for me and booked me for a week later. Okay. It was really terrible for my mother to witness my breakdown. I started to kind of lose it towards the end of the day, but with all due respect, had I not been with my mother and demonstrating, let's say, just a sense of coping and calmness, I would have lost it along the way. So it was very, very good to spend that time with her. All right. Anyway, the agent said, now you know, I found a place. Sunday morning, my flight was Tuesday night. Agent said to me, we booked you through Munich. Anybody listening to the show, anybody who knows anything about Andrea Simitows knows that Munich, Germany would not have been one of my first choices of stopping by, a stopover. But hey, traveling beggars can't be choosers. I took a deep breath and I said, I will close my eyes and spend 8 hours in Munich and try not to think about the Olympics, the 72 Olympics, when they slaughtered our players. I will try not to think about the Nazi gas chambers. I will make it in Munich. Anyway, I had that 72-hour test. Guess what? When I got to Dulles Airport, I found out that the Germans were the only people in the world that demand the COVID test 48 hours before, not 72 hours. My last $250 test was now obsolete. I couldn't get on the plane unless I took a fast. I ran with luggage, with baggage, to 1 hour testing in the Dulles airport. They took the test. I sat, I sobbed, waiting for the results. I prayed, took out my trusty dog-eared Jewish sitter. I prayed. I got the results in time to make it back to the check-in desk for the flight to Munich, and the check-in desk was closed. No dealing with Germans, no flexibility with Germans. It was closed. I could not get on the flight to Munich, Germany. God loves me. God knows that I would behave very badly in Germany. I fell to my knees holding the wagon, and a lovely representative of United Airlines said to me in the calmest terms possible in front of the growing crowd, "Ma'am, we can help you, but you have to conduct yourself. You have to stop crying so we can help you." And I was crying. Things were coming out of my mouth like, I have to get back to Israel. I can't afford any more COVID tests. By the way, the COVID test in the airport added another $250 to the growing cost of COVID testing. And the previous COVID test was now obsolete. They didn't even need it to fly me out. Anyway, with a round of applause to United Airlines, she handed me a ticket, said, "Get to gate D1. I said, "What plane is that?" She said, "Just get there." They checked my luggage. I ran. I tell you, I don't even know what plane I was going on. All I knew was that I was flying back to Israel. I got there. I said, "What airline is this?" And indeed, it was United Airline. I sat on a plane. They checked I had to pay more money for an additional bag. I have to tell you, cost me $1,000 more to get back to Israel, but it was worth it. Absolutely worth it. And everybody has been up this nose. Oh, guess what? You have to have another COVID test when you get back to Israel. You get here. My nose had already, it was crazy. All right. So the joke of the day, I got into Israel 4 hours earlier than had I come on the requested flight via, did I say Munich again? And it was wonderful. And I'll tell you, United Airline, without even blinking, even made certain that I had a kosher kosher meal waiting for me. Anyway, the last thing, I hope you people are laughing with me at the horrors of international travel. I mean, wearing masks forever. By the way, America was very impressive. I know their numbers are no good. I know that COVID is still rampant. But if I didn't know it and I hadn't read it and I wasn't hearing it, everywhere I went throughout the United States, I could see they were vigilant. Nobody could have that mask, certainly not in Maryland, certainly not in Washington where I was. People were reminded constantly. But anyway, my credit card at first did not appear to work. I joke, I kid you not. When I went to get the rental cart to pick up my luggage, 10 shekels, only 10 shekels, about $2, $2.50. Suddenly my credit card said, die, enough, no more. But it wasn't true. And I know that somewhere in the world of Isracard, there are a bunch of people laughing, want to witness what's going to happen, what happens when I indeed open up my credit card bill. All right, in preparing this show, or shall we say not preparing the show this morning, I opened up my folder where I send things to myself during the week, things that I want to share with you. And I tell you, what was very interesting in opening up my folder this morning, there were no politics. There was nothing, no articles written about anger, nothing about our enemies, people that are want to kill us. All I found in there were do-it-yourself projects that I want to do, articles that were written by daughters who were resolving relationships with their mothers. I realized that I tossed away anything that had anything to do with anything sad. Everything's good. Everything was loving in my folder, and everything denoted happiness about being back. My name's Andrea Simintov. Guess what? I'll see you on the other side.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, pull up a chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Thank you for bearing with me and sharing these tales of travel, travail, and indeed a peaceful, delightful return. Okay, now more in keeping with our show, or maybe not. God, this show is personal, isn't it? Okay, so I was telling you. So just kind of like to slow down a little, Andrea. Let's slow down a little. You know, I think I've shared with you in the past that the way I generally prepare this show is my life is busy. I work 6 jobs. I have a husband. I have a home. I have passions. I have things that I'm interested in. And I have a hell of a lot of laundry. But anyway, so what I do is I have a mailbox that I send notes to myself all during the week. And it's notes, things that I want to share with you, things that pique my interest, Pique, I may add. And what happens is on the morning of the show, I get up about 3 hours before the show, and with a cup of coffee, I go through them. I go through and I see what makes sense, the kind of things that that I think will interest you based on the notes and the mail I get during the week, and also where I'm holding. And this week, as I told you, I went through my notes that I had sent myself. And ironically, in a month away, guess what, boys and girls? I sent myself nothing. I sent myself recipes about how to make good pie crusts, home organizing, a lot of stuff from Jewish cookbooks, articles, as I said, that were written by daughters trying to make peace with the conflicts of growing up with what should we say, damaged, angry, disordered, and any other label you can throw at their Jewish mothers. I tossed out and I deleted anything that had anything to do with excoriating these same mommies. You know what was more telling? What I didn't find in my personal pull-up-a-chair folder. There were no political postings. I had nothing in there about the environment. Zippo about the continued siege we find ourselves in at the hands of some still quite angry Arab neighbors. Nothing about my boyfriend Bibi. No corona vaccine pros and cons. Nothing except how to bring more peace, more plants, and more healthy food into my life. You know, in a previously unimaginable first, I share this with you, I never, ever once during this trip listened to a podcast of a forensic mystery or a tale of an unsolved murder. You know what? I think my game was off. And last night, sitting in my living room with my precious husband, I was drinking my first glass of wine in my home, and he was drinking vodka mixed with who knows what, with gasoline. I unpacked a lot of memories. A lot of them were emotional, but you know what? Let's get away from the lofty. A lot of them were physical. I unpacked old English bone china tea sets that I took from my childhood apartment. I unwrapped an antique oil jug, sepia-toned photographs of long-gone European relatives. I took out a crystal four-section dish that had been used so frequently at family dinners. I remember way back in the 1950s. So, what were some of the lessons I learned while traveling away from my home and, in many ways, traveling away from and toward myself? I learned that laughter, sometimes tear-soaked laughter, can be found everywhere. But that in order to reap the rewards of those blessed moments, you have to be present. Not just physically present, but attentive with our souls, with our curiosity, and a garbage bag attached at our hips so that we can tuck away and bury that disease called judgment. It's that kind of presence that you discover the gifts that are waiting. Oh boy, I had a month to practice this art. And a bit over this past month, I was transported just in dialogue, just in talking, just in sitting. I was transported to family gatherings that took place decades ago, in which roasts, rich and thick with gravy and overcooked vegetables, were laden upon old tables that were already sitting sinking kugels and other heart-pulling treats. You know, the relatives, some of who I faintly remembered, and some not, were all fat. Many spoke with heavy European accents. They hugged hard. They roared with laughter. They bemoaned life's trickeries, and they were exuberant in their gratitude to America, even as they wailed over those left to disappear in the charred earth of Poland. I got all of this. I received these stories. I received these treats. I was transported in time while sitting in a beautifully appointed assisted living apartment in Rockville, Maryland. You know, this week, this month, in conversations with my mother, the conversations were held primarily while she lay in a beige reclining chair that must have been delivered by Amazon. The conversations took place while I emptied cabinets, when I reordered drawers, and as I scrubbed the refrigerator walls and secretly discarded, hoarded decades of coupons and recipes that she was never going to cook on a stove and oven combination that she never even had connected. You know what I did during that month? I attended her high school with her, and I learned of the cruelty of prettier students, richer girls, those who were bound for college, and those who were left behind like Mom to learn stenography, comptometry, or like the boys like my father who were forced to learn arranging linotype for newspaper publishing. I heard stories of the boys who didn't marry her and the ones whom she did not marry, the ones who came home from war, and of families in her rooming house neighborhood who would never recover from the boy lost forever in Japan. You know, now that I was safely ensconced, indeed a partner with my mother in this world of geezership, I was free to admit to her about the drunk parties that were held in our family rec room while she and Dad were away on a Hadassah junket. I had a chance to tell her about how time had given me a different perspective on my broken engagement. But I was careful not to cause unfixable angst for the sake of my own narrative. We talked in very relaxed tones about the years leading to and following my most bitter divorce and the gifts that time and reflection had offered. Many of my discoveries were strange and new for her. But you know what? Like a hungry student, Mommy listened. She commented. She responded with an inquisitiveness and displayed a refreshing openness to not know something that I had never in my rebellious youth witnessed. Everything was okay. My mother and I, in her 91st year and my 65th, became friends. Indeed, girlfriends, as I installed antivirus protection, as I taught her to master Netflix, as we watched comedies on television, as we watched dramas. You know, after a short time, I kid you not, I began taking naps with her in her apartment during the day. I ate the remainders of her uneaten breakfasts and dinners that were still being delivered during my visit in cardboard containers. She didn't want to go to the dining room while I was there. I taught her how to make microwave popcorn. Every day at 1 o'clock, we played 4 games of bingo on the in-house television station. I used a number 2 pencil, and she used a cherished professional bingo marker. This made her very proud. She felt that she was the only person on the premises that still had one. Where did I park my car? In the space allotted for future residents. You know, the night before I left, my chest hurt. It was a painful weight, a weight that defies description. Like someone who was already mourning the death of a dead one, I wept. I despaired. There were meaty sobs. I took a tranquilizer. And yet the next day, the day of my departure, everything was good in the world. I sat with her and I went over the rules of happy living. I revisited with her the benefits of putting on makeup and doing things that we don't want in the hope that we're wrong and that activities and people that we once avoided are in fact great. The first thing she said to me on the morning of my departure when I got to her appointment, "Don't mess with me. I'm trying to be nice today." Well, that elicited a yuck or 3, and I gave her her cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. We didn't cry as I drove off. I just merrily planted her on the sun deck, and I left. Best part, I returned home to Israel in peace. Nothing was left unsaid. This is Andrea Simantov. I'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
And we're back. Andrea Simantov, pull up a chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. This is the it's so good to be back show. Oh, I forgot to mention that if indeed you have any questions for me, anything you want to share, anything you want to take issue with, don't write that note. But anything I talk about and you would like to know the source material, please drop me a note at Andrea@IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Love getting your notes, love hearing from you, and really cherish and I very much appreciate the interaction. Okay, one other thing, we're going to finish about me and my mom one more moment. I did find a big bottle of vodka underneath her kitchen sink, and the only time I pulled it out was when I discovered she had about 47 cans of little cans of tomato juice in her fridge, to which I assigned us both 3 cans of tomato juice a day, and she had hers with vodka. Not so much me. Okay, we're in our section of Parsha that we talk about each week. But before we go on, just a couple of tidbits to kind of ground us back to our holy place that we reached together, and came across a kind of just 2 interesting points I wanted to make. While I was away, it was Israel's Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, the Memorial Day for our fallen soldiers and those who perished at the hands of terrorism. And also followed by our Independence Day. There was a time where I swore, be careful what you swear to, boys and girls, because you may not be able to hold it, but I would never, ever be outside of Israel during those incredibly holy days. And I was wrong, because I went to America for indeed a personal, holier reason. But having said that, came across this nice thought. It was Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the new month, Jewish month of Iyar, happened on, I believe, Yom HaAtzmaut. And I want to just tell you that Iyar, each month has its own special personality. And Iyar is a month that's especially conducive to remedies. I love it because I came back to an Israel that is bursting with flowers and bursting with trees and bursting with summer and bursting with hope and bursting with health. And so that it was in Iyar that the manna, which is called, the manna which fell from heaven, it's called lechem averim, bread for the body, it began to fall and served as a preventative medicine. A remez, a hint to this, can be found in the verse, Ani Hashem Rofecha, I am God your healer. All right, so I just wanted you to know that this is a special month, a month of healing, a month of curative powers. Pray for it, believe in it, and work toward that health. It is there for the taking. Now, also in the I also wanted to bring down that from the, I like this section, I call it From the Torah to Your Table, something to discuss on Shabbos, that it says in the Parsha, Lelechet Bahem, to walk with them. The Kasav Sofer comments that every person needs to walk, quote, to walk from one level to the next, that one should continuously be growing and elevating oneself. The Kasav Sofer maintains that every day brings with it new tests designed to impede our personal growth, to throw a stone in our path, and that it is our task to continue our growth process despite the obstacles, to view every difficulty as a means of elevating ourselves by applying appropriate Torah principles. I wish I had read that before I collapsed at the airport at the Munich desk. But it's something to discuss and, comment on our Shabbos table, keeping in mind that this is a time of healing, growth, and indeed change. And before we actually hit the Parsha section, I do want to say one other thing. I talk very frequently about Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler and his book, Michtav Me'Eliyahu, Letters from Eliyahu, I guess. So he explains, he's really the love Rebbe. He's the original hippie in my book. And he talks about that love for another human being. We have a wonderful saying. And, we say, love every man as you love yourself. And Rabbi Dessler, in Hebrew, it's v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Ze klal gadol b'Torah. That is the whole message of the Torah. Love each man kamocha, like yourself. So Rabbi Dessler explains that love for another human being is a direct function of how much a person shares and contributes to others. A person who gives of himself, when a person gives to another, he sees part of himself to be contained now in his fellow man. The more he gives, the more he benefits his friend. And therefore, the more he sees of himself contained within his comrade. a man will come to develop a love for his fellow man, kamocha, even as he loves his own self. This can be understood to be a more meaningful aspect of the mitzvah, meaning that one should give to his fellow man to that extent that he can see his contribution to others reflected in their lives. I just love that and needed to share that today. Okay. Today's parsha, this week's parsha, is called Acharei Mot Kedoshim. You know, there's an old Jewish bon mot, a saying that Acharei Mot, after the death of a person, they become kodesh, they become holy. The person is suddenly, remembered as being holy and noble. I've seen this, I know, in my own life very often, that death seems to be very often a great equalizer of good deeds. It's very un-Jewish, unnice, really crass to talk ill of the dead, those who have passed on. And naturally, we're aware that not everyone is deserving of the most glorious eulogies, but Jewish protocols hold sway. Let me just see here. I have a note in here, just a very sweet note. Let me just see where it was. So Rabbi Beryl Wine, I love his writing. So he talks about that some exaggeration at funeral orations are allowed, that his father of blessed memory was once, when he was a rabbi in Chicago, a noted Jewish mobster died. There was a great Chicago mob, and the family of the gangster was affiliated with the synagogue where Rabbi Wine's father officiated, and he insisted that their father eulogize their mobster relative at the funeral service. So that, I just love this. So Rabbi Wine said that in order to guarantee that there would be a respectable turnout of people at a funeral chapel for the service, the family, of course, engaged the services of a very famous chazan, a very famous cantor, to sing at the memorial prayers. They posted notices in the neighbor that he's going to come to this funeral concert. And of course, this large crowd gathers in Rabbi Wine's father's shul. Poor Rabbi Wine Sr. Was very hard-pressed to say anything positive about the deceased. I'm laughing at this story. So finally, he gets up and he declares in a very necessarily brief eulogy, this man, the Niftar, must have done many good deeds and favors privately that we are unaware of, because look at the large crowd that has come here to the funeral chapel to pay him their last respects. The Torah itself confirms this attitude. The two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, whose deaths are the subject of the first verse of the Parsha, were described in the Torah as causing their own deaths by, quote, offering up a strange fire. The rabbis of the Talmud noted other failings of these two sons of Aaron. They refused to marry. They were intoxicated when they entered the holy precincts of the Mishkan. They had a rebellious attitude toward their elders, Moshe and Aaron. There were other failings. And yet we find that in discussing the matter with his bereaved brother Aaron, Moshe tells him that this is what God must have meant, so to speak, when he told Moshe, through whose death of those who are nearest and dearest to heaven will God's name be sanctified in the world. The Torah points out that their sin of strange fire nevertheless continues to describe the deceased as krovei, close, my nearest and dearest. We also see that not to dwell on the faults and shortcomings of others, not after their deaths. Judgment is the province of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God. Okay? The prohibition of speaking lashon hora, negative, bad speech, it applies to also speaking about the dead. What's very interesting is that in the face of all of this, Aaron is silent. He doesn't complain. He doesn't cast blame. Is he aware of the behavior of his sons? The Torah doesn't comment on this. Many times, parents do not really understand, do not really comprehend that their children's behavior. I learned this myself this week. Nor are they privy to their ambitions or their thoughts. But the Torah leaves all of this as an open question with Aaron. Aaron remains a symbol of the ability to continue life, even when life has struck a deadly blow to that person. In the tragic death of his sons, what is the response? The line is that silence is indeed golden, because knowing how people will respond and who knows what the potential will be released, that will help build the Jewish people and humankind, indeed, sometimes by saying nothing and letting God in heaven do his thing. Andrea Simintov, Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.